chief's name is Momshu Al Sewid. I am a hereditary clan chief of the Weomuskum clan from the Quixotic people who live in the Broughton Archipelago. My Christian name is Harold Sewid, and I was born 1956 in May, and I first went on a boat when I was about 3 weeks old. I started working on deck collecting a cruise share when I was 9 years old. I became a captain at 19 years old and have been a captain ever since. I still fish to this day, and like I told my grandson, I hope that one day you're going to be dragging me off of here kicking and screaming, because I don't want to quit. It's something that I do. It's not a job for me, it's something that I do. The area that I was born, Alert Bay, in what they call the Broughton Archipelago, is at northern Johnson Strait, northern Vancouver Island, in Campbell River, where I grew up, was married and raised my own family here. These are very close to my heart. I've traveled all over this planet, meeting different people, seeing different cultures, looking at how they gathered their seafood. And I can tell you, this is God's little acre. This is the most beautiful part of this planet. All of our ecosystems, whether it's on land or in the water, they all rely on each other. It doesn't matter if it's out of sight and 100 fathoms deep in the water where you can't see it, it still is going to affect the shallower and the shallower onto the land. And the way my grandfather told me that if you go and look at a river system, you'll see the beautiful big trees growing alongside of it. Inside those big beautiful trees will be bears and ravens and eagles, and the salmon will be returning into that river system. These bears and eagles and ravens will be taking the fish into that forest and eating parts of it, leaving the rest to fertilize those trees. Now those trees cause a big canopy to keep the rivers cooler, and at the same time they slow the runoff from the rains coming into the river so that the silt doesn't come in and cover the spawning ground. The nutrients are washed out of the bark of the fir trees, mixed with the soil. They run down the creeks into the ocean, which allows the sea plants to grow. My grandfather told me that all of these things, the water washing down in the river systems, the grass growing, the kelps growing, that keeps the little fish alive and protects them from predators. And if you start taking these pieces out, like cutting the trees down along that riverbank, the rivers will overheat, the waters will rush down, and silt will go over top of our spawning gravel, so the fish will die off. And if the fish die off, the bears are going to die and go, and so will the great eagles and the ravens, and so everything relies on one another. Everything throughout history is in a big circle. Everything repeats itself. When the winters were warm, no snow, but there were also winters when a lot of people died because they froze to death. Now that happens today. You see unusually dry summers, sometimes unusually wet winters, sometimes we're snowed under, and these changes happen quickly. A lot of it is because of what us humans are doing to our planet, but some of it is natural. My grandmother used to tell my father before fishing started, when to do work on his net and when not to. She never told him for many years how she knew this, but she was correct pretty much every time. So one year he asked her, well, how do you know these things? So she simply pointed at a mountain range across from our village, and she said when the snow, in the middle of May, when the snow was halfway down that one mountain peak, you're going to have lots of salmon in Johnston Straits. She didn't know why, but she knew that that snow was always there in the middle of May. I went on to look into this a bit further, and as it turns out, it goes by water temperature. You have a good snowpack, the water is cooler, the fish come through Johnston Straits as opposed to Juan de Fuca. And my grandmother knew that by the old people teaching her. I have seen the snowpack with on the hills on the straits with no snow in May. Then I've seen snow in the end of June, more than what my grandmother said, and of course that was 2010. And I don't believe it has anything to do with ocean survival at all, just the way these fish are going to migrate. I saw good seasons throughout my life, and I saw bad fishing seasons. And there's really no pattern to it. The runs suffered for different reasons. Our people had a phrase called, it was Wayam Galis, which spoke to the terms when the salmon wouldn't return to their river systems for up to 20 years at a time. And this happened before first contact, so there is a name in our language for it. Wayam Galis is a legend, a phrase, which speaks to the salmon not returning to the streams for up to 20 years at a time. This happened long before first contact, and the reason I know this is because our people have a name for it, Wayam Galis. So this legend speaks to the great chief of all the salmon, who has a daughter who's going to be married. So his daughter is his princess. So he declares, in honor of that wedding, he declares a holiday to all the salmon, so they don't have to return to their river systems. And like I said, this event happened up to 20 years at a time. So in history, nothing new of as to what is going on today had happened for thousands of years. There are some patterns, and then the patterns change, and for no reason. I do know with DFO's own records, you go to 1958, was one of the biggest returns on record for sockeye salmon returning to the Fraser River. In 1954, the brood run was very poor. 1978 was a great year for me for sockeye fishing in Johnston Straits, return run for Fraser. 1974 was very, very poor. 1998 was very, very good, and it seems to be every 20 years. But 2010 kind of broke that mold, and the changes that I've seen in the Gulf of Georgia, they're fairly recent. I first started herring fishing after I graduated from school, herring fishing for the roe in 1975. And I remember fishing in the Gulf of Georgia, and we started down in Nanu's Bay and worked our way north looking for fish around Parksville. And it took us a whole day to fill our boat up with herring, and it packed 135 ton. And just this past March the 3rd, I made a set off of Comox Bar, and we pumped 730 tons of herring in one set. So that goes to show some good things are happening. The health of the Gulf of Georgia seems to be rebounding, and in some ways we have still the problem of the seal population. It has to be culled. We know from our own records that DFO have allowed the cull in the Puntledge River at Courtney, and they've done it twice now to my knowledge. And that river is the only system south of Cape Caution on the BC coast that consistently has a fishable surplus of chums. And now we have another species called the California sea lion, which isn't even from these waters, and they're here by the thousands. So this is causing a great impact on our populations of all fish. And I was told by my elders that our people had hunters whose specific job was to sit in front of rivers and take these seals out. And they knew that they were detrimental to a certain point to the returns of our salmon, but they also knew there was a certain amount that had to be there. You have to have this balance. If you allow this balance to go out, it will affect everything else. I think that there's some work that could be done in the creeks and rivers that are salmon bearing or even used to be, because they have a chance of coming back. Those creeks and streams need a little help because we've allowed them to get destroyed to the point where they are. And some people have said to me that, oh, they're only for pink salmon, or it's only a small percentage. We got to look after the Fraser River and the Skeena, the mighty rivers of BC. That's not the case. Throughout history, all of these river systems produced fish, and they all helped in the economy of this province. They helped to keep my people alive for thousands of years. I think they all deserve a chance to have a comeback. I said to my grandson, as we were looking out over our traditional territories, that one day, grandson, I hope you are looking over the bow of a boat like this with your grandson or great grandson, and you're seeing what we see today, the beauty that's here, or even better than what it is.